Hi, I'm Bartees Strange, and I'm here in the 930 Club with the Director of Communications from the 930 Club Audrey Schaefer. She's also the Director of Communications for NEVA. And I'm the Artist Ambassador for Independent Venue Week. And we're going to talk a little bit about 930 Club, its history, why I fell in love with the place, and kind of about some of your background and what you do for this wonderful establishment. So tell me a little bit about the 930 Club and like kind of where we're sitting right now.
Okay, well, for people who don't know about the 930 Club, it formed in 1980. We've been around now for 41 years. It happens to be the most attended club of its size in the world. Most people don't know that because it's kind of unassuming. And we've got a capacity of 1,200, and we moved to this location in 1996. And it's been the home. Our original location was on 930 F Street, which is how it got its name, the 930 Club. And it was just a 200 capacity place, but it became legendary for go-go and punk. But it also was the place for that Nirvana played and Red Hot Chili Peppers. And one night you would have Fugazi playing, and the very next night Tony Bennett. So it was all over the place, really eclectic. But Bad Brains played there, and it was a punk haven.
Yeah. I mean, you know, growing up, like 930, I mean, I'm from Oklahoma, like super far. But I'll never forget, like, the first time I heard about the 930 Club and people were showing me, like, YouTube videos. At the time, E-Bombs World videos, you know, saying, like, oh, yo, have you heard of Fugazi? Like, you ever heard of Minor Threat? Have you ever seen Beauty Pill? And I was just like, what is this place? You know, because I grew up, like, on a farm. So it was pretty phenomenal. So tell me, like, how, I know there was like a previous location that you talked about, but what was the process and why did they move from the smaller club to here, and just like what was the thinking behind that, and when did that take place? I think that's like an important thing to remember when you're in this space.
Sure. Well, first about the old club. It was on F Street at a time where people were scared to go there. You had to be almost like a punk individual to go there, to have not be too afraid to go. Your car, you wanted to keep it on the block if you had one, otherwise you wouldn't have one on the way out most of the times, or parts of it would be going. The club was notorious for the amazing music and the horrible smell. It was part of the charm, was how badly it smelled, and the size of the rats and how plentiful they were. Bands will still talk about being in the backstage and having a pizza carton open and then a rat just fall down from the roof, from the ceiling onto the pizza.
People talk about New York rats all the time, but like the DC rat phenomenon is powerful.
Yeah, it was epic back then.
I can only imagine.
And the smell was so bad that the Washington City paper did a contest for readers to guess what the smell was, and people wrote in, and it was pretty hysterical what they were guessing. But then they hired a scientist to come in and to evaluate what it was, and it was a combination of rat urine, cigarette smoke, and beer, and also moisture that came in through the walls. So it apparently was really nasty, and that if you went there, you would try to take your clothes off before you got into your house because you didn't want that stench to follow you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but again, part of the charm. But it's where all the bands wanted to play and all the kids wanted to go, and that's where Dave Grohl came up, going to that place, watching his heroes come down the hall. But the reason why the 930 Club moved was a place in DC opened up called the Black Cat, and it ended up having about an 800 capacity venue. So that meant the bands found another place in DC, although they might have loved the 930 Club. There's a lot more money if you can have four times the amount of people watching you. So that's when my boss learned that they don't call it show friends, they call it show business. And the bands were going there. And so my boss thought, well, I'm going to have to build another place, the better mousetrap, or I guess it was rat trap back then. But so he was determined to build the definitive nightclub, so that would be once and for all. Bands would know that this is where they were going to play. And there was a lot of competition between the 930 Club and the Black Cat in the beginning, and then it became a friendly coexistence, I'm glad to say. But so the capacity here is 1,200, And we're at 9th and B Streets in Northwest in Washington, D.C. And when we moved in here, you wouldn't dare go here either.
Yeah.
It was really crime riddled, and people thought that he was crazy to build a place here. Who's going to go there? Nobody's going to come.
Right.
But there was no. And now that DC has built up so much, fast forward 20 some odd years, people call the 930 Club a pioneer in this area. Well, it wasn't a mission to become a pioneer and have the neighborhood welcome us. It was like there's no other place you could afford to go.
Yeah.
So, but that happens in a lot of cities across the America and in small towns too, where music clubs, independent music clubs, have to go to the worst part of town to get the best real estate cost. And once they do that, then people come.
Yeah.
And people see that, well, hundreds or thousands of people are coming into a building, and then a restaurant opens across the street or a bar down the way, and then shops. And that's what happens, thankfully, because of people's passion and art about coming into a part of town that they're going to brave whatever they have to do.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, growing up outside of New York, my mom taught me you have to go to the worst parts of town to see the best music. And she would take me to the worst parts of town to see blues and jazz. And so for me to come here when this place opened, and it was definitely sketch, I was like, well, Mom knew.
Yeah.
You got to go to the worst parts.
Well, it's cool though, because I
Yeah.
mean, like the 930 Club, I feel like is, like you're kind of explaining, like, 930 Club pops down, or a venue moves to like a part of town where they can afford, but then it eventually becomes like a source of pride for like the area and eventually the city. And I feel like, I was in New York playing for the last 4 or 5 years, and anytime a band big enough could play at the 930 Club, everyone in New York knew. Like everyone was like, dope, you're playing 930? Sick. Like, how? That's normally the next question. But like, I'm curious, like, what are some of your favorite 930 moments? Like, you've been in the area for a while. I'd love to kind of hear what you have to say about that.
Well, first, I'd have to tell you that I was a fan and a ticket buyer for many years before. I was a corporate suit with a musical taste of a petulant 17-year-old, and this was the place my kids and I used to love to always discover new bands, and they would be playing here. And none of our friends have ever heard of those bands, but we'd come here, and the place was sold out, 1,200 people. It's like, wow, this area really gets it. And we would see bands of all different genres, and the same thing would happen. It's like most normal people would have never heard of the band, and you weren't going to hear them on the radio, but you would see the 930 Club filled with people.
Yeah.
And but to pick my favorite shows would be, there's been a bajillion of them, both back when I was coming here as just a huge fan, and now that I've been the luckiest person on earth to get to work here since 2017. But
Top three.
top three? Okay, I'll do them.
Top
I'll do
three.
them. And I don't follow rules, so if I go more, then I will. But I'll
Top
make them
three
interesting.
or more.
Right. Well, I have to say, the first band I ever saw, no shame in my game, was Rooney. It brought me down here. Phantom Planet is my favorite band on earth, so I would get to every single show and watch. Back when we had stacks of speakers, they would climb them, and Alex Greenwald, the lead singer, would jump off, and I would be in horror and hope as he did it, but it was so captivating. And surprise Foo Fighters show, how could that not have been right? I mean,
hometown
I
hero.
felt like I was walking on a cloud. It was it was a show for Big Tony, who is the head of Trouble Funk, and Dave Grohl decided he wanted to throw him a birthday party, and so it was Scream, where Dave Grohl sat he was drums for Scream back in the day, and Trouble Funk played, and then Dave came on and said, he came on with a guitar toward the end, and he said, it was a Monday night, and he said, if it's okay, I'd like to play a couple of songs. And the crowd went crazy. And he said, who am I kidding? I'll play a couple hours. And it was just Dave and his guitar. and the stage was dark. And halfway through the song, the lights went up, and all the Foo Fighters were there, and the crowd went nuts. I have chills just thinking about it right now. It was crazy. They played about 3 hours, and I say it was a Monday night because that's back when Metro only went to midnight.
Right.
And so the whole crowd stayed, and everybody was like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to curse here, but F it, I'm staying. I don't. I'll figure out how to get home."
Hell yeah.
And it was crazy. And at one point, he's standing on the bar taking a shot of Jaeger, and the crowd's going crazy, and it was just nuts. So that was up there. But getting to see Al Green here was so special, right? The first time I saw Willie Nelson was here.
Wow.
Loretta Lynn was here. Pink, Justin Timberlake. Oh my God, it was so dreamy. It was nuts.
I can't believe this.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's
Yeah.
like, of course, these people have played
Green
here.
Day, underplays galore. They're so much fun. But then
Golly.
again, seeing artists that are emerging, like what is going to be my favorite thing, October 22nd, here, seeing you open for Lucy Dacus.
I can't believe that's actually real.
It's happening.
Crazy.
Pinch you.
Pinch
me.
Every day, I
Yeah.
wake up and I'm like, my life is different than it was a year ago.
I hope it's happy.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like I'm learning so much. It's like starting a new job, like we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
today. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, this is your life now, and but you're kind of in charge, and you can make it whatever you want in a way that's never been real for me.
Yeah.
So it's really special.
You are the boss of you.
Yeah.
You get to make decisions.
Yeah. I
And
can say no.
You can say
sometimes.
no.
Yeah.
And not only can you say no, you could say, I want to do that instead.
Yeah, and I get to choose how it looks.
Yep.
Who's there? Everything. It's a pretty amazing.
Yeah, you remember that.
Yeah. It's
You are the boss of you.
yeah. It's a new thing, a new, deeper realization than I would have said a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Good.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. You know, like you were describing that Dave Grohl show, or the Foo Fighters show, I should say, and it reminds me of like all these moments when I've been in venues and I felt like I was like in a movie, or I felt like I was like a part of something. And I feel like that's kind of what 930 Club represents to me. Like the first times I came here, I had just moved up here from Oklahoma. I didn't know anybody. And I knew about the 930 Club. And I remember like trying to come to shows here. I was living in Wheaton at the time.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, like how do I do this? I was like learning how to use the metro, like learning how to like navigate the city.
That's a lot.
And I remember like coming for 930 Club used to do these dance nights. They'd still do them, but it was like a beach themed dance night. And they just played like surf rock and like all this stuff. And I remember being like, oh, like this is like way more than just like a venue. Like this is like a community center slash like church slash like, you know, it's like this thing where like everyone is kind of getting together to just have a good time. And it's like $10 and I can totally afford that.
Right.
And it felt so low pressure and like such an amazing way to like meet the city and to
Yeah.
meet people who were like doing things here that I was interested in.
Right.
And then the next time I came, I saw Beach House, and it was a completely different experience. But I was just
bet.
like, yo, this rocks that like there's a place in the nation's capital where it's like everyone is welcome, which is like
Right.
not exactly what you always think about when you think about DC.
Right.
And I thought that was like just precious. You know, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And you're lucky to be a part of it.
Well, I'm so grateful. I remember one thing, it does feel like a sense of church or community, and because you walk in and you're all there for the same purpose. You're there to enjoy what's on stage and to get that feeling of escape or entertainment, wonderment, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, and you're all in that together at that moment. But I remember when we used to drive down from Montgomery County 45 minutes to get to the club, which I would go with my kids, you know, oftentimes a couple times a week because there's so much great stuff and you don't want to miss it. But I remember one time we were driving and my daughter at the time was 14 and she said, you know how kids are dramatic. If the 930 Club was a person, I'd marry it.
I would agree.
I've obviously remembered it because I repeated that, but there was something about it, just like this emotional thing that you just love the place, and every night the place is different. And like I describe it as a kaleidoscope. It's the same thing, but you turn it a little bit and it looks completely different, and again each night, and it looks different because of who's on stage and the vibe they bring, and it's different because the people who come in because that person is on stage.
Yeah.
Like when Melanie Martinez was here, and her fans lined the block about 10 hours before doors on this most scorching hot day. And it was a community of people that felt such an association with an artist who talked about feeling like not being a part of the rest of society, and being misunderstood and having pain. And there was such a connection about that. And seeing them and knowing what they were getting out of it, watching it.
Yeah.
And then the next night seeing a hip hop act and people just losing their mind, dancing and spitting out the lyrics along with people at completely different places, night to night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty unique thing to like DC and 930 Club. I mean, I feel like in a lot of places I've lived, like bigger cities I've visited, you've got like the venue where the indie bands play, got the venue where like the big rock and pop, big hip hop acts play. You've got your venue for like the older crowd goes to and they do their thing. They have like, you know, Babyface comes and plays, you know. But I feel like at 930 Club there's this like all-encompassing vibe where it's just like, yeah, dude, like pull up, you know, like, and that's like the best, you know, especially in a place where it's like DC has this like vibe of something being kind of sometimes a little pretentious. It's a little, you know, people don't know where they stand with each other. But I feel like in here, it's like you can just kind of float and be yourself, and it's like special for that reason.
Come here when Big Frida's here.
Oh.
You will see DC has got a whole other side. Just as an example, people just put all their game face, they check it at the door, and they are who they are, and it's a commune.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're communing.
Oh my God, I would do anything to see Big Frida play here.
And Peaches. And it gets crazy.
Heavy.
Yes, it does.
Good night. I'd love to see it. Well, how did you find your way to be like working here? I mean, you've been here for a while.
Yeah.
I know you've done a lot of things, but how did you end up working for 930 Club?
Well, first I was a huge fan of the place.
Right.
And but then I had a big corporate job, and the kind that people would kill for, but I didn't want to do it anymore. And I thought, you know, I remember my grandfather telling me when I was a little kid, and I didn't understand it then, but I remembered it, was you can't take it with you and you can't send it ahead. So in other words, you got to enjoy this time along with your responsibilities, but every day is all you know that you have. Nobody knows how many of them they get. And I was like, you know, I've got to be the architect of my life, and I do not want to do that anymore. And I did not know what else I wanted to do. So I really didn't want to do anything at that point. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, if I could do anything, what would it be? And I thought work for the 930 Club. So I asked the owner if I could go to lunch with him and pick his brain, and he said yes. And he gave me no hope to work here because, again, #1 most attended club of its size in the world, and they never had anybody doing PR. So why would they need anybody to do PR? But we stayed in touch, and then when I decided to really leap from my other job, I called him up and said, well, I'm ready to come work for you. And he was really nice, but basically was saying, do you not remember our conversation? But he turned me over to the COO, who I guess he figured could get rid of me faster or figure out if there was a fit. And I sent them a proposal, and I got my first chance to work for them for the Virgin Fest, Richard Branson's baby. We put it on in Baltimore in Pimlico, which is a big racetrack, and it was the second year of the festival, but it was the first year that they were going to 2 days. And so I guess they must have been underwater in ticket sales. They figure, why not give her a try? She can't make it worse.
Right.
And
And you nailed
It
it.
was I killed it.
You nailed it. You crushed it. Yeah, 100%.
I'm really modest about it, but I really, I look back and I was like, damn. But at the end of it, they said, part of what I do is I think of my role in communications is to promote and protect. And I take them both really seriously, and I got the chance to do both of those at a festival because there was all sorts of things that could happen. At the end of the festival, they said, okay, come talk to us about the 930 Club.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dang. PR life. I remember it.
When we're not being recorded, I'll tell you what really happened.
I was about
with
to
the crisis stuff. I don't know.
I was about to say,
should I tell it?
I was like, I kind of want to
I don't
know
know
the bad stuff.
I'll tell you the one bad thing.
Tell me.
It's going to involve a curse that,
Cool.
bleep me.
Cool.
So I worked with a CBS reporter. I got him to do a whole package on all the aspects. And he came, we had him film a band and a performance and about the food and the art and all this stuff. And then the last thing he wanted to do was to talk to a fan. He said, is that okay? And I said, sure. I said, do you want me to pick the person or do you want to? He said, I'll do it. And so we're standing outside of the dance tent and this young looking kid comes out. He was probably in his early 20s, a nice looking fella. And the producer said, would you be okay if we interviewed you to tell about the experience? And the kid said, sure. So they mic him all up. And the producer's asking him questions and the kid's doing really well. And then all of a sudden, the kid looks at me and he said, right in my eyes, he said, I'm really fucked up on acid. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
How did
Maybe you shouldn't.
How did you resolve that?
So you with a PR background, yeah. So the producer and I instantly our eyes met, like oh my gosh, and so they cut the tape. Thankfully, it was being taped. It was not live.
Yeah.
Woof. And so I had developed a little bit of camaraderie with the producer during the day, and I said, listen. That's not representative of the festival, right? You agree with me? He said, right. I said, so would you agree not to air it? And he said, yeah, I won't. I said, can you erase the tape? He said, no. He said, I can't wait to go back to the studio and show the guys. So I had to, that is his right to have that film. That was his film. There was nothing I could do about that except for hopefully engender that kind of relationship that he wouldn't want to use it against us.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He was noble about it, but I did have to warn the organizers, like, this happened and hopefully that will be the end of it. And now this is the first time anybody really knows about it.
Hey, well, that happened.
It did.
But
it's statute of limitations, right?
Yeah, boom. It definitely exists in journalism.
That person who was being interviewed is probably knocking on the door of 35 or 40 right about now, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, it probably works on the Hill.
Yeah.
probably.
I thought he looked familiar.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I know you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it kind of ties into my next question. Like, what would you say is like the biggest change or like realization you've had moving from being like a fan who was like buying tickets and like coming all the time to being someone who's kind of like representing the club?
That's wow. So one thing that I've not lost along the way is the music and the art first, because I adore that. I still love discovering new music. I love to be in the room when it happens. I love standing out watching people pour into a place just so I could see them in their anticipation and the electricity and knowing that they're going to be leaving their problems at the door and then going in and having this time that they've been planning for so long. I mean, they went online, they bought the ticket, they decided what they were going to wear, they decided who they were going to go with. Did they eat? Are they going to eat here? You know, all that anticipation. That to me is an enormous driver. and I also want people to discover the bands that we have here because they deserve to be discovered.
Yeah.
If people don't know about them, and so I've learned a lot. Probably, I don't know what. But I think what I've learned is that anything that we do is really to make people on both sides of the stage happy and comfortable and feel safe and appreciated. But that's always been a mindset that I've had. Like, if you're going to be in business, make it something that you're really proud of. Like, this is my house. When I go into all of our venues, it feels like my house. So I want to make sure that, but I feel like that because everybody does. From people who've been here for 30 years to people who've been here for 3 months. There's this adoration for the place and a sense that how lucky are we to be stewards here. And it's I was a really shy kid, and I wasn't a cool kid, so I never got to hang with the cool kids, but I could be in the back of the room watching all the cool kids, and that's just heaven.
Yeah. I identify with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. You kind of touched on it a little bit about like the role the 930 Club plays in just like this discovery of like new bands, and like I know just from our conversation earlier, we did talk earlier, I do know Audrey a little bit, that like the way that this place is built, it's built to accommodate a lot of things. And I think that that's like pretty fascinating, and I'd love to just talk about that a little bit, because I think that's something that makes 930 Club like super special, is this idea that it's like, it's not just for like Dave Grohl to come through and like play for 3 hours. It's also for like Bartees, who's new. It's also for people that are playing at Seven Drum City, who are like putting a band together and are gonna like do the big show here at the end of their like time, so yeah, I'd love to hear you just talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's I give credit to Seth Hurwitz, the owner, who was the booker for the longest time, and now we have Jen Haas who's booking. But there could be a tendency to want to pigeonhole a place. A lot of venue owners have done that, like they are this genre or this niche, and they're not around anymore, so many of them, because the things come. If all you are is a disco place, disco went away. But if you're a place that can welcome in whatever's new and next, in addition to bringing in the legendary people that want to play here, then you've got a business that can last for a long time, and this is 41 years. And there are times, every Wednesday we put out a list to the general public about upcoming shows, so they know what's coming, they can buy tickets. I would say that, and as much as I try to steep myself in this stuff, I probably know every week, I probably know about 15-20% of the names.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn, and that part could be a little bit intimidating, especially as somebody who had a career before music and was like the new kid on the block in my mind, even though I went to a gajillion shows. But then I realized, I shouldn't give myself a hard time about that any more than I would if I was someone who loved books and walked into a library and think, oh, I should have read every book. No, you can't yet.
Right.
You can learn about new things. And one of the things that I've always loved to do is get there right when doors are. Not only so I could get my place to stand, because I always had this one place I wanted to stand, up the stairs, on one stair where they only let one person per stair, so nobody could like brush up against you, and it had perfect view. That's the other thing about the 930 Club, is that you'll hear from people. It's got the best sound and perfect sight lines no matter where you are.
Yeah.
But I love to get here early, not just for the stair, but because I wanted to learn about the opening acts. And some of the opening acts I've seen, of course, turn into headliners, but you got to discover them when people weren't expecting. You don't expect anything. You don't know what to expect.
Bless you.
Yeah.
Going to see the opening acts That's
on purpose.
On purpose.
On purpose.
Shout out to you.
Right.
I feel like that's my style.
It's
If I'm going to a show, I'm like, oh, I'm going to the whole show. I want to know who's there.
Yeah.
It's like fascinating. Now I'm like in this situation where like I'm choosing bands to like be my opening act. And I'm like,
Ooh.
I'm like today, I was like listening through like this whole list of bands that submitted, and I was just like, my God, like this is so cool.
Look
like
at you
I'm gonna
doing that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna like bring someone on tour, and like they're gonna get new fans, and I'll be in some way part of their musical journey, just
Absolutely.
like so many have for me, and it's just like, I love that, and it's like such an amazing part of like making things generally. You know, it's like making something so big that you can have someone else benefit from it is like amazing. You know, it's my favorite part.
That is, and just like you'll always remember the people who had you open for them, it's going to be, they'll always remember Bartees Strange gave them their chance. And I was listening, it's different, but Tiffany Haddish was talking about why she's got her production company, and part of it was like, she doesn't have to do all of that stuff, but she wants to bring people up. She wants to give them jobs, and but this is, and those are creative jobs, and so is the opening band. What I used to do, before I did this for a living and just used all my free time to think about music, was to create lineups. And so if I would hear an act, I would like to think, who should they go on tour with? And I would develop their little lineups in my own head. It was, you know, people have fantasy football. I had fantasy booking. Yeah.
That would actually be a really, is there a way we could pull that off? Like a game?
You and me?
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Book a show. What's the show you'd want to see? Like right now, if you could book any show. That's heavy. That's a tough question.
That's a lot.
Well, sure
I think about, well, you know, I've been dying to see you live, which is why we got you here. So
thank you.
Go through anything to do it. But I'm thinking about a lot of the bands that we didn't get to host because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
That I've missed. And but if I were to do like a fantasy, it would have to have well, Mavis Staples, Brandi Carlile, Phantom Planet, LCD Sound System, Sturgill Simpson.
This is a festival now.
Nathaniel Rateliff.
Yes.
Her.
Gosh.
Tiffany Haddish will be the MC.
Okay,
I'll stop now.
Can you make me a Spotify playlist? You're on. You've got taste.
Well, I've got ears, is what I got.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Taste is everything.
It's a start. Exposure is a start.
Yeah.
You know.
For real.
Growing up, when I was a little kid, and people would say, if you're reincarnated, what do you want to be? And I wanted to be Ella Fitzgerald. Because that was the thing that just sent me when I was a little kid.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a hard question.
Can't sing.
Gosh, we play this game in my band where it's like, if you could be in any band, like dead or alive, like what band would you want to be in?
Ooh.
And mine has always been like Band of Gypsies.
Oh, okay.
Like it would be so sick to be in like the band that Jimi Hendrix was in to have fun.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
like when Jimmy wants to like let his hair down, he goes and plays the Band of Gypsies show. Like that would be the best gig ever.
I was just in Minneapolis last weekend for the first time and went to see Paisley Park and to see they show a lot of big footage of Prince and his bands, and those I am really grateful. I got to see him in real life twice, and it was fun because, well, it was Prince, and so it was mind-blowing, but the first time he always has people who pop on stage to surprise people, so maybe that could be something that you get to do. It's so much fun. The first time was Questlove. And the second time it was at Warner Theater, which has got 1,800, 2,000.
Yeah.
And it was a surprise show. It was on a Sunday night, and it sold out in a second. And then they added another one at midnight and sold out in a second.
Wow.
And so it was midnight on a Sunday. I went to the second one. And the surprise was Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
Nuts.
Out of control.
Nuts. When the night was over and we all poured out, well, first he had two bands. He had his female band first, and then he had his band that had all the brass for the second act, so to speak. And I saw somebody on the side of the stage that I thought looked like Stevie Wonder, and I said it. I wasn't sitting with my friend because our tickets were all over, and so I was talking to a guy who I didn't know, and I said, I think that's Stevie Wonder. And he looks down at me like, oh,
No
please,
way.
that's
Right.
not Stevie Wonder. Anyway, when the show emptied out, everybody stood in the middle of the street just talking because we couldn't go home. It was just too electric.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you believe
Gosh.
what we just saw?
Oh my God. I can't wait to go to that place. First Ave and
Oh,
Paisley Park.
yeah.
I'd like to see that. I think I'm going to lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm playing there.
First Ave was, I just walked in and cried, and there was no show going on. It was just like you felt everything in there.
Venues-
Church.
Church, really, for real. It gets that way. Like, I even think, it's just this combination of, like, it's time, It's like everything that happened then and everything that's happening now and everything that will happen. And I feel that in this space. I mean, like, where we're seated right now, like, this is from the old spot, right?
This bar right here, it's kind of like the sourdough starter. This was a sourdough starter for the new 930 Club because, it wasn't like, the first place was so magical that anytime you're trying to recreate or take it to the next level, like making it literally 6 times the capacity, I'm sure that there were some people that were like, oh, how do we keep that magic and be this much bigger? And they decided, this came from a Knights of Columbus originally, and or one of those types of groups, and it was at the old 930 Club, and then they chopped it, you'll see they chopped it into pieces, and they walked it up here. So they would have a piece of the old 930 Club.
Wow.
Yeah.
This seems extremely heavy, and I can't imagine that. Is there photos of that? That would be cool to
Oh,
get.
yeah. Oh, I mean, not them bringing it here, but
Yeah.
there and then here, yeah.
Oh, I wish someone had a picture of it. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have a random question. What's the story with, like, the brownies or the cupcakes?
The cupcakes?
Yeah, because I've seen
Okay.
them for years, and I've always been
Right.
like, this is dope, but, like, who did this first and why?
Okay,
I
so
want one also.
the owner, Seth Hurwitz, is a foodie, and
Okay.
he spends a lot of time in Austin too. And there was a food truck that I think was Hello Cupcake or something like that. And he really dug that, and he thought we should bring him to the 930 Club. And I think everybody rolled their eyes. And it took about a year. They were working with the bakery to get the exact right combination, and it's chocolate with buttercream in the center, and then chocolate ganache, and then chocolate icing on top. It's nuts, and it's got a picture. It's got the 930 logo on top of it. That's hand drawn, each one. And after a year, they got the combination, and this is a signature cupcake. And I am not ashamed to tell you, I thought that is the most ridiculous thing. Who wants a cupcake in a nightclub? You've got a beer in one hand and a cupcake in the other, please. And who's going to spend money on that?
Right.
And you had to order a certain amount from the bakery, which is in Alexandria, Buzz Bakery, for it to be worth it, for them to drive them out
Right.
here. And so then he decided, let's start putting them in the dressing rooms, what we've got there. And then the bands loved it, and they started to tweet them and put them on Instagram and put them on their socials on Facebook, and then that became the thing.
Yeah.
And they became notorious. And in fact, we're going to be coming out with our first 930 Club cupcake T-shirt in this next week. So you heard it here first, people.
Get ready for your 930
But
Club.
and that's what it is. I will meet artists from if I'm traveling or at a conference or something like that, and they'll say, "Where are you from?" And I said 9:30 Club, and they'll just talk to me about the cupcakes and the sound system and how nice Ed and Gus are and helping them in with their,
Right.
unloading, and that they can do laundry here, and they'll go on and on. But cupcake is
Yeah.
often the starter.
That's crazy that you can do
Yeah.
laundry here. I live
Well,
here, so
it's-
I'm good.
yeah.
But if there's ever a time when I'm not,
It just makes so much sense. If you're a band that's stuck in a van or a bus with all of your bandmates, how where are you going to do your laundry?
yeah,
On the road? You're not.
you're probably not.
Or it's awful.
Yeah, things are so fast.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's like near impossible. I mean, we've kind of talked a lot about like the 9:30 Club and its like significance, and also like why it's important that it's like in DC. And I've always had this like, I mean, when I first moved to DC, I was working like in the political space and the nonprofit space and
Yeah.
on the Hill every day, and there was this huge disconnect between like that DC and then like what this is representing. But in the same breath, you come here and you see all those people from Capitol Hill here, and you see all the locals. Like
Right.
we're all here, and
Right.
somehow that space has been cultivated. But I'd love to kind of hear you talk about how like DC's impact on 9:30 Club, and also like how 9:30 Club has changed DC. Like I feel like there's like a transfer of energy that's happening there, and I mean you would probably know the most about that.
Well, the original club being really raw and smelly and punk and go-go. It had a different texture. And the place where it was you had to have a certain lifestyle to go there, you think. But then again, people lead double lives all the time. Like when I worked in corporate America, there's only like one or two people there who knew what I did when that I was coming to shows all the time. It's you compartmentalize, and that's
Right.
your other life.
Right.
And you you let your hair down where you let your hair down. But I think that we got to really watch the DC coming into its own in a way it hadn't before, and I credit that to Obama. When he came to town, bistros started popping up, restaurants got interesting. I'm from New York, and I grew up that you could walk into any restaurant and the food's going to be great. And when I was a 14-year-old kid and we moved here to DC, I was like, oh my gosh, the food. It's
amazing
like
that you
they
were
think
14.
that Pizza Hut is the Italian restaurant. Sorry, Pizza Hut, if you're still around.
Too real.
But it was, but I couldn't wait to get back to New York to eat really great food. Well, now
Yeah.
DC's got great food and great art and edgy. Before Obama came, it felt like all the women were walking around in Talbot outfits, and everybody had to be really buttoned down. And then I don't know if it was him making people just love the city, but wanting to come here, and not just come here, but to work in government, but to stay and put their roots down. And H Street is another part of DC that that started to really come around in 2006. So it was a couple years before Obama came in, and that was another area that I remember the first time I went to the Rock and Roll Hotel, which was a music venue that unfortunately is no longer with us. But I hadn't heard of it before, but there was a band playing I wanted to see, and so I looked it up and went on their website and saw that they were telling you, if you take the metro, don't walk to the club. And the club wasn't that far.
Oh yeah, that's
But
like
they
a
just were
10-minute walk.
afraid for you.
Yeah.
And they also said, be careful where you park. We don't know a safe place, basically.
Yeah.
But now, it's popping.
Yeah.
But there's people who really care about art now, and they care about fashion, and they care about food, and they care about each other. And I think people want to make a difference. You saw what happened this summer with the tragedy of George Floyd, how at DC, I'm telling you, everybody was so safe about COVID. And really careful. The streets were empty. It was like a ghost town.
No, DC
but
did
when
a really
that
impressive
happened,
job.
people knew that they just had to go out. and they had to take that risk, mask up, and have your voice heard. And it's a passionate town that really cares about, I think, about civility but equity and equal rights and human decency, and you cannot murder people and right in plain view and think that that's going to be okay. We have to do something about that.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting. I mean, DC is like one of the bastions of, it's like one of the few majority black cities in the country. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to move here. I mean, I remember seeing like Chad Clark and like Bad Brains on like little zines, little magazines, and little videos and interviews, and just being like, oh, like I was like at a point in my life where I was learning who I was and things I wanted to do and the people I wanted to be around, and then to see like this place, Howard University's here, the Howard Theater's here, like Marvin Gaye was here forever, like Chuck Brown, like all these legends that I grew up, my parents just saying their names, and I was like, well, if I'm going to be a black artist somewhere, like I want to be like there. It seems like that's where they are. And so
Thank you for coming.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yo, I'm like so proud to be making music in DC.
I'm so
it's like my
grateful. And you mentioned Howard University. Ta-Nehisi Coates just signed on.
I know.
And Neely? Oh gosh. Oh well.
She's here too.
When they edit this.
Yes. Put her in there. Yeah. UNC wasn't smart enough
Howard,
to take her.
Howard gave her the tenure that she deserves.
Nicole Hannah-Jones.
But Ta-Nehisi Coates went to Howard, and he used to come to the 930 Club, and that he's going to come back. I mean, there's just a great sense of pride about that.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
It's good energy. I love it, and I really like. I love making music in this town because I think I have like this underdog complex, probably because I'm from like nowhere, where it's like playing in New York, like everyone thinks like, oh, we're in New York, it's the coolest, and it kind of is, but people kind of like overlook like what's happening in DC sometimes. It's really easy to get caught up in like the Philly, New York thing, and I just love that like there's so much energy in DC right now, and I felt like the protests and everything that summer was just a reminder that like DC is like so much more than like what you see on TV.
Right.
Like there's people willing to put like everything on the line for people, and I was like so touched by that. And I mean, this is something that like my grandma said to me that I was like, dang, that is such an incredible realization. We're watching the protests like on TV, and she was just like, well, like this time it's a bunch of white people out there getting beat up, getting sprayed down, getting like bit and sprayed at, helicopters hovering over. And it was this moment where I was like, more and more people are willing to take on the weight. It doesn't have to be just us anymore. And I thought it was just like an amazing realization, and I was like so proud that it was in DC, and I was just like, yeah, like I always get so much pressure now to like move to LA or like go to New York and like do the thing, and I'm like, I'm gonna hold it down.
It's well, but what your grandmother saw wasn't just in DC.
Right.
That was all over the country, and it was in Europe. It was in other places. People came out, and in places where it felt, I'm sure it felt far more foreign and dangerous. In Alaska, white people came out about it because we saw someone murdered. And there's just no way that could ever hold. And the heartbreak of knowing that, but for that video, that cell phone video, that who knew who was taking it at the time? Who knew what, would we have ever known? And
no, probably not.
We as a nation, I don't know that we have come nearly as far as I would have hoped as we had in a year, but we need to get there. I'm really old, so I remember the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. I was an 8-year-old kid in a carpool, and growing up in New York, New Jersey, and I remember sitting in the back seat hearing the news, and I was like, wait a minute, what is with adults? I don't understand this. How could this be a thing? How do people not know humans are humans? Didn't we have a war about that? 1865, didn't that settle everything? I was such a naive kid, but and the fact that here I am at this age and we're still having that conversation.
Yeah. It's
and
yeah.
I everybody needs to figure out what they can do to work hard. We're all searching for things and doing things, and I don't know how we can get there, but we have to.
Totally. I always think about like what's happening right now. I'm always thinking about music and its relationship to what's happening socially and like politically. We were talking like earlier today about just like the 70s. I was in a meeting earlier today where we were talking about it again, and always like I was making these comparisons, you know, to just being like all this incredible music that came from such like a tumultuous time. Like I talked to my parents about the 70s, and my mom's like, I can't believe that like we like lived through that. Like it was like Vietnam War, intense poverty, crime in every city, like nobody had jobs, mess everywhere,
Right.
you know. But at the same time, you know, it's Marvin Gaye, it's like Carole King, it's Funkadelic, it's everything, you know.
Right.
And I look at now, and I look at like Phoebe Bridgers and me and Namdi and all these artists, you know, Felicia Douglas, Melanie Charles, Lorraine, Bad Moves, and then after coming through this pandemic, and I was so scared that like, oh my God, like right now is like a time where so many things are going to be created, but there might not be very many venues left to hold the show, and so I know that you've been working on that a lot. Like I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about just like how we protect like independent venues going forward, and like the role of that in what is going to be like a huge like musical moment. Like I feel like we're like in the middle of something real, you know?
Well, instantly that was the fear when the pandemic hit, and originally we all thought we were going to be closed for 20 days, and how we're going to get through that. And then by the end of that 20 days, the end of March, we all realized that, oh, wait, this is not just flattening the curve for 20 days. This is something that is taken hold. And so a handful of us, and I got a call from a woman who I met once for a couple minutes from Minnesota saying, you live in DC, you must know of lobbyists. We're going to need to lobby for federal aid for independent venues. And I thought, yeah, I live in DC. And I know lobbyists, sure, like we could get this done. But the fear was real, and we formed the National Independent Venue Association, and for the express interest of getting federal emergency relief, because we knew independent venues were going to go under with no revenue, being shuttered for we had no idea for how long, and all the enormous overhead. We knew that there's just no way to survive that. And so we defied all the odds and formed, and we went from 0 members, and we now have 3,000 across the country. We're in every state. And a team of real warriors got together and fought not just for themselves, but for each other and their competitors. And we were able to get a $16 billion relief package. It was based on Save Our Stages, and then it was passed as the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. And that was signed into law at the end of December of 2020. The money is just starting to flow. It's been coming, so it took forever to start.
Of course.
And unfortunately, as we were waiting for money since the beginning of the pandemic, probably, I'm estimating about 300 venues went under, but I think that we've been able to save an industry by getting this infusion to be able to have independent venues be able to get the money that they can reopen. They will be able to reopen, and we're so lucky that in this country to have not 1, not 2, but 3 vaccines that everybody has access to. You don't have to have any money, you just have to have an arm. And the fact that we can reopen safely is, you know, a year ago, July, we didn't know that.
5 months ago?
No, we did not
3
know
months
that.
ago? Yeah,
so,
no, I know. Yeah.
But now that the industry has come together for the very first time, then we've decided, I think collectively, okay, we can never part. Look what we've accomplished with this. There's so much more we can do as an industry to help more venues, more cities, more little towns, more diversity within ownership and bands and artists and employees, and that's what we're going to work really hard for and become an association, hopefully for decades to come.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, shout out to Neva, and thank you for hosting me in this beautiful space.
Oh, thank you.
You know, this has been really awesome, and I can't wait to like come back here for real next time.
October 22nd.
It's gonna be pretty sick.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
I'll meet your mom.
You will.
Yes.
She's gonna love it.
Thank you, Bartees.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. And that's it. You know, thanks for tuning in, and you know, have a good night, world. Yeah. Okay.